Hey everybody, it's Andrew here, and it's about 12 o'clock, and we are going to get started with our session on the 5 Ws of mindfulness. As you come in, if you have questions, or if you could take a minute on the chat, if you see a chat form, please, complete the survey, and this way I will be producing content that is good for you, that you're interested in for the future. But I thought with how we're all dealing with the anxiety and the stress and the uncertainty of being under home quarantine and or stay-at-home orders, and with the growing interest in mindfulness, I think many people have started to find it a little confusing or overwhelming. Pages are being put up, there are apps, everyone's using this buzzword, mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness. And the question is does it all mean the same stuff? What is it actually that we're talking about? And so I wanted to provide a little clarity around these topics. And growing up, when I went to school, there were always the 5 Ws that you were asked to know about and to be able to explain: the who, what, when, where, why. And so that seemed like a great place to start when it comes to mindfulness. So if you are joining on the webinar, if you do have questions along the way, feel free to use the chat. Hopefully I will see them. If the chat does not work, then you can always email me at a later time. This will not be the only or the last time I talk about this subject matter that is becoming more common and more acceptable and better understood. This is kind of a starting point, a launching point for these topics for you. So when we talk about mindfulness, let's jump right in. What is it? There's the, where does it come from? Where does this word come from, mindfulness? This is an English translation of another language, and we always lose something in translation. And there are different types of mindfulness, but most simply stated, mindfulness is observing power. That's right, that's all it is. It's like a microscope for your mind. There are many aspects of our experience. We're typically so focused on the external world, external accomplishments, that we take for granted this mind-body process. And we never really invested that much time to learn about it. And it obviously has a huge impact. It's like if you jumped into a car, well, knowing whether you have a minivan or a sports car has a big impact on the way those two automobiles will perform. And so it's the same with our own mind and body. There are many factors influencing our behavior, our moods, and the first step in coming to understand those, again, there have been sciences which have studied those externally. So you have a whole field of psychology or psychiatry, and even neuroscience now is starting to use modern technology to be able to peer into the brain activity and learn about which regions of the brain are associated with different behaviors, and which areas of the brain, which centers of activity, of human activity, are centered in different areas of the brain. But there's another way to come to know and understand this mind and body process, because that's what we can observe directly, either our mental activity, we have thoughts and feelings and pleasant and unpleasant sensations, or our physical activity, aches, pains, the breath. These are all physical forms that are directly observable. And so mindfulness is just about our ability to observe what's going on in our mind and body. Now, a subtext here is, if we think about how our mind and body works, sometimes our physical leads to mental activity. So if we have dryness in the mouth, that can lead to the thought and to the intention, I want to get a drink. So first there's a physical trigger, and then there's a mental result. The reverse of that can also be true. Sometimes we have that thought, I want this, or we see a picture of a pizza in our head, or a picture of an ice cream in our head. And that then leads us to the activity to fulfill that image that we have. We will call and order pizza or make pizza at home, or we will go to the freezer or go to the store and get an ice cream. So a mental trigger leads to a physical activity. Now, there are also mental to mental triggers. So we might have a fear, a worry, or a picture, or a memory that triggers a train of activity. A memory, a pleasant memory, may lead to feelings of joy. So the trigger is that pleasant memory, and the result is joy. Or we might have a frightful memory. That's a mental phenomena, and that will lead to fear. And then finally, we can have physical that leads to physical. If we go outside and it's very cold outside, then the body will start to feel cold. And if we go outside and it's very warm outside, then the body will feel heat. So that's a physical causing a physical. So it's actually very scientific how this mind-body process works. And when we start to pay attention, we can start to see and understand it the way we do if we pay attention to anything. If we watch a basketball game, or we watch a movie or a Netflix series, we're going to understand the plot, and it's going to trigger different thinking and thoughts and emotions. But those are all observable activities. They require no blind faith, no belief in anything. We're dealing with what is observable in the here and now. And that's what mindfulness is. And mindfulness is a mental quality. It's a mental factor. So it's like we have biceps and triceps that we can point to on our arm. Well, when certain approaches dissect what our human experience is made of, mindfulness is one of the factors that actually has a very positive influence on the rest of our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and activity. So mindfulness in its simplest form is observing power. And the more we cultivate and develop mindfulness or do activities that nurture and encourage stronger mindfulness, then when we do those activities, when we do those things, our observing power becomes stronger. Just like if we go to the gym and we do bicep curls or tricep exercises, those muscle groups will become stronger, but they aren't only developed in isolation. They're associated muscle groups when we work out our physical body that develop with the primary focus, and it's the same with our mental activity as we develop mindfulness, as we work to develop the strength of mindfulness in our mind-body experience. Along the way, we will develop other strong and positive mental factors, as we can call them. So that is what is mindfulness. So who is this beneficial for? Well, clearly anyone that has a mind or a body could use these tools and techniques that will help improve their overall performance in life. Paying attention and recognizing good qualities and bad qualities, good behaviors, good results, and bad results is something that we can all benefit from. And so a lot of people are reluctant to start the practice because they don't want to change. And they worry if they're going to have to change because they have some puritanical view of what happens when you develop mindfulness. And I can tell you, you don't have to worry about that type of thing. It's like shedding weights that you're carrying around. You're not going to lose any beneficial qualities. You're not going to be forced to do anything other than what you believe you should do. But what it will do, what stronger mindfulness will do, is give you greater insight into your activities and behaviors that actually bring you happiness and those that cause you regret or remorse or self-blame. Now, none of us like that tendency when we do something that we regret and then we, quote, beat ourselves up for it. And this can actually lead to even rumination and even anxiety and depression. So not that those anxiety or depression are purely caused by our own behavior. But sometimes we do things that trigger them or that make us feel less than happy. And so if we can cut out a number of those factors just by paying attention to the impact of the decisions we make, and we're not doing this from an analytical point of view where we have to think a lot and figure it out. Through natural and simple observation, which you're using right now as you listen to me or watch me, it's that same quality that we're going to now harness to bring about more beneficial results, meaning the types of activities and behaviors that bring us happiness. Or if we have conditioned ourselves in certain tendencies that we don't like or that bring us unhappiness, by seeing that more clearly, you will actually ultimately be able to let it go. So the reason we hold on to bad habits isn't that we don't know on some level that they're bad. It's just that we haven't completed our understanding. And once we complete our understanding, the change will come naturally, not through willpower, but because we understand deeply that certain behaviors lead to us being unhappy, depressed, or miserable. And so when we complete our learning, and our learning takes place internally, not according to some external guidelines, by having a tool, a system, a framework that we can apply, we will come to be able to let go in a way that we've never been able to let go of before, that comes from wisdom or understanding. And this is all self-directed. It's not somebody judging you. It's not somebody imposing their idea of how you should behave on you. It's coming from you simply observing and watching and understanding what the real impact of certain behaviors and activity are. So that is what is mindfulness. And that is who is mindfulness for. So where can you find this mindfulness? Can we go and take a course and find mindfulness there? Can we order it using Amazon Prime or Google Express or Costco home delivery? Unfortunately, not. The only way you can strengthen your mindfulness is really paying careful attention to what's going on in your mind and your body. We can't actually increase mindfulness directly. But just like when we grow plants in the soil, what we can do is provide a rich environment for those plants to grow. And it's the same with mindfulness. By nurturing and cutting out the weeds and developing a rich environment, mindfulness will naturally take root and grow stronger. And that's an important distinction I want to make. You already have mindfulness. We all do. This is like in the Wizard of Oz, where they get to the wizard and the wizard simply points out to them that they already have, the lion has the courage, and the scarecrow has, the Tin Man has a heart. And each of those qualities that they've been on a search for, they actually already possess inside of themselves. So that's the good news. Don't let anyone sell you mindfulness. You already have mindfulness. But what most of us were never taught is how we can actually develop mindfulness so it becomes stronger. Now, you may ask, why would I want to develop mindfulness where it becomes stronger? And very simple, when we take more careful look at what is actually making us happy, what we'll come to see is that mindfulness is actually the leader of the pack. When we do something that brings us happiness, when we do something that brings us joy, when we do something that brings us pride in a good sense, the confidence of accomplishment, mindfulness is at the heart of that activity. So think about that for a second. The activities that you look at in your life and you feel happy about are driven by mindfulness. Or if you're a professional and you're a high performer, you could be a pilot, or you could be a business executive. There are times when you've been working at something and there's almost an effortless flow of knowing where you are, what you're doing, and what you need to do next. And that heightened form of intelligence, or flow, as some people call it, mindfulness is a key component of that. And so again, by strengthening mindfulness, we bring about all these other factors that help us perform at our best. So if we can do take the actions that support, nourish, and grow mindfulness and strength, there will be more times when we feel glad about the way we're living and the things we're doing, and less times where we have remorse and regret. So simply spending some time on trying to develop mindfulness is already very beneficial, because we're avoiding a whole range of activities that we might otherwise get into trouble with that may be making us unhappy. So there's a beneficial effect of simply avoiding the things that make us unhappy by trying to practice mindfulness. And then the more time we invest, like everything else, the more skilled we'll become in our own practice of mindfulness. We'll actually be able to start recognizing what mindfulness is and distinguish it from when we don't have mindfulness. Now, many beginners to this endeavor get very confused because they think calm is what they're seeking. And calm is one of the beneficial side effects of a mindfulness practice, but it's not the actual goal. If we go back to the definition of mindfulness, it falls under observing power. So anything that helps us see in the service of mindfulness is beneficial. And that doesn't mean we only have to see calm. That means we may see worry or fear or pain or agitation. All of these different things, although maybe difficult to pay attention to, are actually beneficial, because we start to learn more about what our real life experience is like. It's not always pleasant. And so recognizing that sometimes some things are pleasant and sometimes some things are unpleasant is a great starting point, even just to be able to categorize them in that way. Some things won't stick out to us so strongly, but we'll know whether they're on a subtle level pleasant or unpleasant. And that knowledge is very useful. Again, it's a good guide. But there are also more specific things we'll come to notice. There could be thoughts, feelings, emotions that we come to see and understand more distinctly. There could be physical sensations that we come to understand more clearly, aches or pains or itches. Or maybe we'll start to understand the quality or the characteristics of these, as I say, phenomena that arise. So even a pleasant sensation or a happy memory has the inherent quality of it pops up, we don't have control over it, it stays for a period of time, sometimes very short, sometimes more extended, and then it dissipates. And so when we start to see that, one, each object, each thought, feeling, sensation that we pay attention to is different and distinct, just like every food we eat has different flavors, different characteristics, different tastes. In the same way, there is one universal quality that all of them share, and it's that they arise, they show up, they do their little dance in our mind, and then they dissipate. And because every experience that we encounter has those three fundamental characteristics, there's only so much lasting pleasure or happiness we're going to get from them. So think about that for a minute. If everything, even a happy memory, arises, does its presence, and then passes away, we're likely to be left being disappointed because something that we loved and we cherished, we couldn't keep around forever. But the opposite is also true. Sometimes difficult or painful sensations or emotions will arise. We don't invite them, but they come. Maybe it's an itch. Maybe it's an emotion like sadness or depression. We don't invite these things into our life, but they come anyway. The more we try and run away and ignore them, the longer sometimes they stay. Sometimes it's like a child who's pulling on our shirt sleeves and asking, "Mommy, mommy," or "Daddy, daddy." The longer we try to ignore and pretend that they don't exist, the longer and harder and louder they get. But as soon as we turn to them and pay attention to them and give them the attention they're looking for, they'll go on their way. And sometimes very little effort is needed. It's the same way with our own psyche, our own consciousness. Sometimes there are thoughts or feelings or sensations, not always pleasant, that want us to pay attention to them for some reason. And until we learn how to pay attention to them and give them a presence of our attention, then they'll dissipate very quickly. And so seeing that nature shifts how we relate to our life's experience. We stop having to run away from unpleasant things. We stop having to replace unpleasant with pleasant, or we stop seeking, requiring so much effort, pleasant feelings or sensations, because we come to realize at the end of the day that no matter what they are, they're going to be present for some period of time, but then they're going to end. And we don't have control over that. And the more denial we live in about those characteristics of our experience, the more suffering and unhappiness we're going to have. So this practice about observing many different insights and understandings will occur to us along the way. Just like any activity, whether we're riding a bike or studying a subject at school, the more time and effort we invest, the greater our understanding will be. And that understanding doesn't pay us in dollars. It doesn't pay us in job promotions. It does pay us in happiness and a kindness and being compassionate and understanding. And in this sense, compassion and understanding isn't a weakness, but it's a strength. It teaches us how to respond to other people and to situations in our own life more skillfully. We deliver responses that are in tune with what is appropriate and what is needed. So, like any skill, the more skilled somebody gets, that's power. And so these qualities and these factors can actually develop from intermittent moments to powers of mind where they become dominant. So these are some of the amazing characteristics as we start to develop mindfulness. In the beginning, it's going to be intermittent. Our habit for most of our lives is not to be mindful. Our habit is to be lost in distraction, to be looking for pleasure. Those are our habits. And so simply because we close our eyes and all of a sudden we're starting to try to pay attention to what's going on in our own experience, of course, for the launch of our effort, we may be able to focus. I can close my eyes, and if I try to focus on my breath, maybe I can pay attention to it for an instant. But then our old habits, they come back. And so many people give up and get discouraged at this point. But that would be a mistake, because what you're seeing, these habits of mind and the power they have in your mind, is a good key to understanding that this is going to be something that takes a little time to work through. And when you have that frustration, that disappointment, that you're not able to accomplish even this somewhat simple task of paying attention to your breath, when that frustration or disappointment arises, now you can know that that's actually normal and natural. The habits of our mind of not paying attention, of not strengthening mindfulness, are stronger than our habit to develop and strengthen mindfulness. Most people haven't invested very much time or effort in developing mindfulness. So we've talked a little bit about who mindfulness is beneficial for. And of course, it's all of us with a mind or a body, but it's especially relevant for people that want to grow and become better. Lifelong learners, perfectionists, if they approach this training with the right attitude, and top performers, of course, they'll realize this is an iterative learning process. You're going to do it, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to have to correct. And so if you're of a set mindset where you just want to do it and learn how to do it and do it perfectly, well, you're not going to find an alignment with this practice, which is going to require many micro adjustments and learning along the way. The other day, I spoke to a group of 20-something, predominantly female, athletic and surfers. And the analogy of surfing on a wave came up. Now, I don't surf, but from looking at other surfers and living in California near surf communities, what I noticed is you can't just stand up on the board and not make any adjustments. But when you're looking and you're deciding whether to catch a wave, that just begins a process then of swimming to catch up to the speed of the wave, jumping up on your board, and then adjusting your feet and making many small adjustments throughout the whole ride. And so it's the same with us paying attention to our, not only our breath, but all of the phenomena that's rising and passing away in our mind-body process. If we strive too hard, we may overshoot the object that we're trying to pay attention to. If we're too lackadaisical, the object that we want to pay attention to may have already come and gone by the time our attention shows up to pay attention. And so we need to balance that effort to connect with the object and that effort that we don't overshoot the object. And we don't just get it right once. We have to be making many micro adjustments along the way. And this is part of the skill and the satisfaction that comes from the practice. Now, in the beginning, we're going to do just like any beginner would. We're going to overshoot and undershoot a lot. But somewhere in that practice, in that process, we're going to keep hitting the object every now and then. And we're going to be able to clue into what the object is and how we can stay more closely connected to it. And so therefore, the gaps in our attention and our ability to pay attention are going to become smaller and smaller. So what is the benefit of having smaller and smaller gaps between the object that we're paying attention to and our ability to pay attention? Well, there are two. One is the closer we're able to observe, the more understanding that's going to arise. Think about it. If every time you were working on something, you turned and looked away, then in those, or if you're playing a sport, say tennis, and somebody's hitting a ball at you, well, if you're not following that ball and you're turning and looking at the crowd, then you're going to miss the ball. So once you keep your focus on the court and then you focus more intently on that ball, you're going to have a higher and higher success rate of hitting that ball back. And so it's the same in this practice. The nice thing about this practice is it's very, I wouldn't say obvious because you have to pay attention, but it's very commonsensical. When people learn what this whole practice is about, they realize they're developing their common sense, their sensibility. This isn't about taking on something new or external beliefs, but it's about developing your internal sensibility and judgment and knowledge. So we've talked about who mindfulness is for, what mindfulness is, when is it appropriate to do mindfulness? Is mindfulness an activity that we should do once a day for 5 minutes? Is mindfulness an activity that we should do all day long, every day, or is it somewhere in between? And this brings up a story that my teacher once told of a cow that is giving milk to its calf. Before the calf can take care of another calf, it first has to grow up and be a mother. And then it has a child, a baby cow, and then it can feed the baby cow. So before we should expect that this is a practice that we can integrate at any time, we do need to spend a little time learning what we're actually trying to do and understanding it. Now, in some cultures, they teach these things from a very young age, and the culture is constantly supported by lectures and talks and spiritual teachers talking about these types of matters. Unfortunately, in the West, it's just becoming a topic of interest, and so we don't have a very strong foundation in our understanding. So taking a course or going to learning in the same way that we learn other topics efficiently and effectively would be the first step. You want to seek out a well-qualified teacher, just like you can go to many different types of places to learn English or to learn business. Some people seek out higher education opportunities so they can learn from leaders in particular areas. So you have to decide whether you want kind of a mass market free introduction, which may teach many different methods, but historically, obviously, apps and mass market wasn't where people would go to learn these topics. They would go and seek out the best teachers and train with them. And there are multiple reasons for that, but let's not go into that on this talk. The second factor that we're talking about in terms of where to go to learn this or qualities to look for would be, are they teaching you as a generalist, many different methods, or are you learning one specific method that you can start to apply in all areas of your life? So if you're going to the guided meditation approach, and they're going to be guiding you through what to do in any given moment, then it's unlikely that you're going to be able to carry that over into the course of your daily life. So if you're looking for the ability to not get so angry in the heat of the moment, to be able to recognize your emotions so that you can prevent yourself from saying or doing something that you regret, or if you're looking to increase your intuition so that you can check in with your gut in the moment and learn when to trust it and when maybe it's not so reliable, well, then guided meditations and apps aren't going to give you that skill set. They're creating an environment where you can go and be guided. But some people will want to break out. They'll want more than just what listening to somebody else tell you what to do. And they'll seek out one of the specific methods that they can learn to do on their own. Now, along the way, as somebody is learning how to practice, there are challenges come up, and all of them are not unique. Many of them show there's certain patterns that start to arise as the mind starts to observe itself more carefully. And they're well documented. And so ideally, you want to work with somebody that teaches you what I call a $1 million method. And that's a single method that you can use in all areas and all aspects of your life. So that overwhelm and confusion of what should I do now gets eliminated because you have that single method that you're learning to become skilled at on your own. Now, when you have that $1 million method, there are going to be these bandits that come up and grab your attention, that hijack you, that undermine you. And many people don't know the difference between kind of one of these well-known bandits and something that they're doing wrong or that it's not working for them. So some people, when they're attacked by the bandits of doubt, for example, will think they're doing it all wrong or there's no point in doing this because they don't see any progress. But somebody who has the benefit of a bandit buster will not only be able to recognize those qualities that are undermining their success, but they'll have the antidote to them. So ideally, if you're looking for a program, you should look for something that gives you the bandit busters, that helps you identify and counteract the tendencies that hijack people or make them unsuccessful. The third quality that a good program will provide is a way of boosting your joy. Now, for some people, they think that mindfulness practice is a public service, like government service, that they should just do it even if it's painful and they don't get any rewards. Well, that's not quite the reality. If you're practicing properly, you should be able to gain benefit that leads to greater happiness. Now, happiness is not the ultimate goal. That's a waypoint. That's one of the side effects. Deep peace, understanding, these are some of the outcomes that will totally shift and transform your life. But being able to boost your joy, being able, if you wake up in a cranky mood, to neutralize that, or being able to feel a certain happiness that you felt before, but you may not be feeling at the moment, well, those joy on demands, that's an important and powerful tool to have. So you should have a program, if you're going to learn this, that allows you to boost your joy on demand when you decide that you need it, not when somebody tells you it's a good time. The third area, where were we at? We're now at the fourth. The fifth area that you really want to have some resources available to you is in your communication. I find a lot of us say and do things that we regret. And learning how to speak in a way that communicates what we're feeling without us feeling like we're bottling it up, but doing so in a way that doesn't trigger or create an avalanche of repercussions that we're going to later regret, is a skill that, again, many of us could use some fine tuning on, whether it's in personal relationship or maybe it's at work. I've heard of many people who have blown up and gotten angry, and that instant, even though it only lasts 30 seconds, has lasting repercussions on them. The next area that I think is very important is the time amplifier. And so coming back to when should we do this? Once you have all of those qualities, you have $1 million method. By the way, the first thing that I didn't really mention, which we're kind of covering today, is about mindset, what the range of possibilities that can come out of these practices is. Well, then once we have those first 5 factors, then the time amplifier comes in, and we'll start to realize, because we have an understanding and an accessibility of a method to us, we can then apply it anytime. And that reminds me of one of the students in my program who was driving down the road and somebody was tailgating him. And he was starting to get road rage. And so he decided to use the $1 million method while in the midst of driving. And it didn't require him to close his eyes or do anything weird. And so what he did is he started recognizing what was going on for him internally. And he saw that his breath was short and that he was tired, he was angry. And so as he started to pay attention to this anger, he noticed very quickly that it was interlaced with judgment. Not only was it was fear and judgment. This guy's a jerk. Why is he tailgating me? It's 5:30 in the morning. What's wrong with him? So there was a certain self-indignation, righteousness, and judgment. What a jerk. You can imagine what was coming into his mind. But as soon as he recognized that there was judgment, it shifted him from the content to the process. And as soon as he saw the judgment, he started to see this pattern in his life where he would get angry, he would notice the judgment, and that would lead to anger. So the judgment triggered anger. If you remember at the beginning, we talked about how some mental activity can trigger other mental activity. So the more judgment he laid upon this person, projection, what a jerk, doesn't he know it's not safe? He realized he was making himself angrier and angrier. And so in recognizing that and in using the $1 million method, which involves paying attention and labeling, he could see that maybe he was making some assumptions which were incorrect, and it helped shift his mindset. Maybe this guy wasn't a jerk. Maybe this guy had an emergency he was attending to. And maybe my student was being the jerk by preventing him on this narrow road from getting by. So he pulled over and allowed the car to pass, and he realized how much suffering he causes himself throughout the course of the day. And he realized when he got to his next meeting how different his experience was, because instead of getting angrier and angrier and ruminating and reflecting on what a jerk this person was, he had let it go. Not only that, he'd left himself with a positive impression of who he was. He was a kind and compassionate and generous person here. He pulled over and let this other person go. And so he started to realize through this that he was causing himself a lot of suffering throughout the course of the day. And through this simple activity of applying what he knew and he had learned into his daily life, it didn't require setting any other time aside. It was like a heads-up display for his life. It could guide him while he was actively living his life. And many people find this, whether they're sitting on Zoom calls and getting irritated, or whether they're on a telephone call with somebody, whatever the circumstance, if we can start tuning into strong emotions that are coming up before they cause us to act in a way that we regret, then we can save ourselves all the recovery time that mess would take to clean up. And maybe we can even actually add greater value to somebody's life and leave a smile on their face and on our own. So that's the sixth element of a good program. It allows you to amplify your time. It doesn't take dedicated periods and more of your time. But as you take to the practice, it becomes second nature, and you realize you can be more aware while you're doing everything that you And that then leads to the final the real benefit stage, the integration phase, where you start recognizing patterns and processes, both externally and internally. You start developing, as a result of that process awareness, pattern recognition. You start developing greater intelligence around how you conduct yourself and how you interact with others and how you understand others. Many times we're blind to other people's feelings and emotions because we repress or ignore our own. And so once we start to recognize and identify and label and be honest with what we're actually feeling and the impact these feelings have on us, then we're able to recognize those similar characteristics in others' people's more quickly, and we can become kinder and more responsive, again, starting with ourselves, but expanding to others. And then the final phase is when I call it mastering the matrix. And any good program, any good system should teach you how to become self-sufficient. If a business model, if a program is built upon a business model that requires you being a lifelong customer, then they may or may not really have a goal of you becoming fully independent. And in this training, in these practices, obviously the idea is that people become islands unto themselves. You become skilled in your own domain, a master, and you can share these techniques and approaches with others. So that is how you can get started. You can do an app, or you can find a teacher and take it more seriously. There have been many people that I have spoken with who have spent years practicing before they were seeking the benefits but hadn't really found them. And then when they learned the method, again, I didn't create these methods, but in the course of my travel all over the world, I did find them. I spent considerable time in myself learning them, understanding them deeply, and now I'm sharing them with others. So I hope we've covered today the who is this for, the what is mindfulness. Again, it's a characteristic we all possess, but which many people don't realize that they can develop on their own. That's the who, the what, the when. Well, as we get skilled and have a basic ability we can start applying it more effectively in all areas of our life. And with this coronavirus going around, you can imagine the more mindfulness you have, and you will make fewer mistakes, whether you're a medical professional dealing with patients, infected patients, and making sure that you don't touch your mouth or do any of those dangerous behaviors, or whether you're just a regular lay person like me, again, being mindful of washing your hands, the things you touch, but most importantly, the interactions we have with others. So that's the who, what, when, where. You can learn this online. You can learn this through Zoom. You can learn this in many different places and capacities. And why I hope it's become clear, all of us, the better understanding we have about ourselves and about the things that we do in life that lead to real and lasting happiness, and the things that we do that undermine our happiness, the sooner and the deeper an understanding we have of that, the better lives we'll be able to live for ourselves and as an example to others. So I hope you found this session useful today. What I'd like to do in the few minutes that we have left is lead you on a short guided instruction. And if people do have questions, you're welcome to contact me either directly or through email. I want to be a resource and make this information available to more people. I think I discovered it. It changed my life for the better, and it can add a lot of value to your life as well. So now what we're going to do is just a very short guided session. If you close your eyes, and the reason we close our eyes is because we're going to pay attention to what's happening in our own mind and body. And so we don't need the additional distraction of seeing things that may make us think of other things we need to do. So as a beginner, it's helpful. And we close our eyes, and you can just settle. And notice, again, this is observing power, so we just want to notice. And usually when we close our eyes and notice, our attention will move around. It could be in our face or in our sinus area, in our neck or in our shoulders. But the breath is in our abdomen, our tummy area, the diaphragm area. It's moving naturally on its own with each breath. That's meant to be the easiest, although for many of us who have office jobs, our thinking and all the analysis is very active in a habit that's very conditioned and ingrained. So when we close our eyes and when we start to notice without any other activity, sometimes our thinking becomes predominant. And again, if we fight with that, if we try to make our mind quiet when there's this habit formation taking place, it'll only get it worse. So allow those thoughts to just do their little dance in our mind. We don't want to encourage them, and labeling them can help us break the influence they have over us. So if we're thinking or planning, we can label it as thinking or planning or analyzing. And then if we can notice the breath, we can simply label the breath as rising or falling. And there are really two reasons we do that. One, it helps us know whether we're paying attention to what's happening. So if our breath is, the abdomen's rising, but we're labeling falling, we know that we're not really paying attention to it. And it serves as a guide of what we're paying attention to. It helps us see the process more than the content. And again, we're learning to balance the resting and relaxing aspect versus the making effort aspect. And in the West, many of us, we're always trying and making effort, and the relaxing is hard. So just coming into the actual sensations in our body, or if our attention is on our thinking, allowing it, but giving a soft mental label for what it is, recognizing it with the specificity of being able to identify it through a label. Thinking, planning. In our body, we may feel tension or stiffness or pressure. And it's normal for our attention to jump around. So even a few minutes like that, you may notice that you're slightly less tense. You've settled in your body slightly. Some people feel a little sleepy. This practice doesn't make us sleepy, but as the mind becomes calm, we can feel tranquil, which we associate with sleepiness. And sometimes we are sleep deprived, and it can lead to better sleep quality and or sleep. But those are some of the things that we can learn to work with along the way. So that's a very brief guided mindfulness instruction. There's a lot more to be said, but it gives you a taste of what we've been talking about for an awfully long time today. And to end the session today, what I'd like to do is a little bit of that boosting joy on demand. And so to do this, I want you to take a memory of a time when you were happy. And you could see the picture behind me with my kids. My son there is interested in something, and he's eating a plum and he looks happy. And my older daughter's having fun and being a little goofy. That was a time when they were happy, and we need a snapshot like this. There's my other daughter. She doesn't look so happy. But for this practice, we want to take a moment of a memory that we had where we were happy. And I actually used a time in my childhood when I was standing, it was a sunny day, and I was standing under a tree and looking up at the blue sky. And we're going to take this image and hold it in our heart area. Again, we're so accustomed to being in our head that it can help us calm down and be relaxed by holding it in our heart. And we're going to say 4 phrases that will help us connect with the feeling in this momentarily brief memory that we have. The first is, may I be safe. And you can see in a moment when we're safe, we're free of, in a moment when we're happy that we're remembering, we're free of external enemies and we're free of internal enemies. The anger and resentment and judgment, all these things that cause us sadness or unhappiness. And when we're happy, we're free of those. And the truth is those internal things cause us unhappiness a lot more than the external enemies. We don't meet external enemies nearly as much as we meet the internal ones, the anger, the frustration, the judgment, the sadness. So in that moment of happiness, we're safe from those negativities. And that's the quality of that memory that we want to reflect on. The second phrase is, may I be happy. And we chose a happy memory. So reflecting on that aspect of that memory will help us boost it a little bit. The third aspect of that experience or that memory is health. May I be healthy? Because in a moment of happiness, our body's, in the background because it's in good order. It's not a problem. And so it's physical in nature, the strength and the wellness that we're reflecting on in that momentary memory. And finally, the last phrase is, may I look after myself with ease. And this is that sense when we go through the day and things flow effortlessly, it's an ease. And in a happy moment, there was ease. So these are simply 4 phrases we're going to boost in our own heart, starting with ourselves. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I look after myself with ease. And you can make these phrases personal to you. There's nothing sacred. It's more about associating with the feeling that's connected to that memory. So we start with an image, a memory, a positive, a happy memory, and then we're associating these, cutting through it with these different aspects: safety, happiness, health, and ease. And so we say these phrases: may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be at ease. And then we can open this up to everyone. May all beings, this includes ourselves, we're generating this from our own heart. We can extend it to our immediate families, our loved ones, our pets, our parents, our siblings, our colleagues, all the people, the healthcare workers, the first responders, the military, even people we maybe find difficult sometimes, world leaders. May all beings, may everyone in this world. We know this is idealistic, but generating this perception is very beneficial. It removes the limitations that block our happiness and allows us to transcend them. May all beings be safe from enemies. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy and strong. And may all beings look after themselves with ease. So I thank you for joining me today. We're up on an hour here. I'm just being a cheerleader for a practice that brought great benefit to me. And as we're seeing in modern America, it's bringing great benefit to many people. These practices don't have to seem foreign or esoteric. They're, as I've tried to point out, almost commonsensical. They're relevant if you're a CEO, if you're the President of the United States, if you're a leader of a team or a family. The more on point you are doing things that inspire others and make other people happy, you can still set boundaries and not be a wuss. The better you'll be, the better respected you'll be, the more gratitude people will have for you for being in their lives, and the better the world will be. But we can start by focusing on these 2 square feet, starting with this mind and body, and getting better at this and serving as an example to others. So thank you very much. I think somebody said this is going to be kind of the new greeting that we use post-coronavirus, as there's no hand touching other than our own. It's a sign of respect. May you be happy. May you be well. Thank you for joining today, and I look forward to connecting again.